mean, if you take, NAFTA, Richard Allen, he was with Reagan, right, in the Reagan White House, and he was fired because he accepted a wristwatch from the Japanese, and he went to work for the Heritage Foundation. And he's Council for National Policy, and that's Heritage Foundation. Ed Fulner, who set up an office in Moscow when the wall came down. These are CMP people, but Richard Allen wrote NAFTA. And, so people have got to understand that, although, Heritage Foundation, turns out all these wonderful reports and everything, that 90% of which you could agree with, but 10% of what they're doing is really even more important than the 90% because they have the globalist agenda. They love the UN. They want an international system. They, of course, think they're going to run it. But they're going to run it with Rockefeller and everybody else. It's a very, very bad, or bad's hardly the word. It's a very deceitful, deceptive group that I found out through trying to work with them. They hate me, but Roz Haley from Texas, down there where you guys are, she was lovely, like the grande dame of the Council for National Policy, and she's a close friend of Norman Dawes. She and I put together a project to get out of the UN, a really good project. And we sent letters to 300 or more members of the Council for National Policy to help us. Samuel, my son, typed all the labels out of the computer. This was 15 years ago. We didn't get one single response, even though Roz Haley was highly thought of in the Council for National Policy.
Charlotte, this segment's over, but now I want to get you back on about the CMP and the infiltration of conservative movements by the globalists. Because just like Skull and Bones, you've got Democrats and Republicans from there, correct?
You absolutely do, and I think they're more dangerous. I think that the neoconservatives are more dangerous than the left, because the left tells the truth, as bad as it is. They don't lie all the time to us. We know what they're doing, but the right wing is lying.
Incredible. I'm going to have you back on then soon on the CMP. Stay with us, folks. This is important. We'll be right back.
All right, there you go. There's the clip again.
And so he never came back from a commercial break after that?
If you go to his podcast and you download the show, there's nothing after that. That's the end of the file. And I was listening to it live, and I was kind of curious. I wasn't really paying 100% attention because I was at work, but he said he was going to come back. And so just a few minutes later, it was the repeat of the show. It was just the beginning of it. So that was it. That was the end of the show.
Well, that was amazing because he clearly said there that they were going to come back in just a minute, and then the show was over. Wow.
Yeah, it's on the archive, that's for sure.
Makes you wonder if his phone or his communication device wasn't blowing up after that from people saying, "Damn you, Jones! You were told never to talk about that." I don't know. You never know.
The phone call during the breaks, and
Pruneface is calling in. Let me talk, Alex. Damn you, or whatever he said that one time when he had him on. He was talking over Jones, and he's like, "Damn it, Alex, let me finish," because Jones was talking all over him. Boy. It's funny to see Jones cower down to him like he's a minion or something.
Yeah, well, he knows who his masters are, apparently.
Obviously.
He has to grovel to Mr. Roberts because he's evidently higher up in their little order that they have. But yeah, man, I tell you what, that clip, very, very interesting. And I don't know. I'm definitely going to be including that one in the film. But I tell you what, the one thing that's really interesting is that Charlotte Iserby, she talks about the Council for National Policy being this evil globalist organization. What I find interesting is that I have this article from newswithviews.com entitled Operation Save U.S., dated March 7th, 2007. This is written by Charlotte Iserby. And she lists a bunch of conservative organizations that contact to fight the North American Union, okay? And let me just read off some of these, okay, Josh? I'm sure you'll get a kick out of this because it really is kind of funny if you know what's going on. Let's see. The Eagle Forum. Phyllis Schlafly, contact the Eagle Forum. Who else? Howard Phillips, the Conservative Caucus. Of course, he's our Council for National Policy member. Who else do we have here? Oh, yeah, Edwin Fuellner, the Heritage Foundation. She actually encourages people to contact the Heritage Foundation. Edwin Fuellner. She lists the Council for National Policy, the evil globalist organization. James Dobson, Focus on the Family. Again, our Council for National Policy member. Who else? Tom DeWeese.
He's a nice fellow. I got to meet him in 2008.
Tom DeWeese?
Yeah, he's a nice fella. He's a real nice fella. Yeah,
really?
Oh yeah, I had a couple conversations with him. He was actually really sad that we didn't stay both days, and we were me and my sister were leaving out of the place, and he was like walking in as we were leaving, and he said, "Hey, you guys are leaving? We've got." Who was the guy that we got Chuck Baldwin coming up. You guys are leaving before Chuck Baldwin gets here. We were like, yeah, because I went up to him and just started talking to him like a regular Joe. That's one thing I've noticed that I did notice when I went to that event was that there were some people there, and I found this more in the research too. It seems that some of these members of the Council for National Policy are sort of just, they are sort of like Jones kind of said in that segment about porch masons. It does seem that there are some kind of people that are involved in it. I'll give you a couple of examples. One example of a person I met that's in it, and if you ask him about it, he's very upfront about his association with the CMP, and that's Jerome Corsi from WorldNet Daily.
Right.
And he's really, really personable and upfront about it. He says, "Oh yeah, I'm a member, yeah, and they were gonna run me as president." But they decided, to go with somebody else. But he's real upfront about it. But then you have other people like Dr. Michael Kaufman, who was the president of the CMP. He was just a total, excuse my language, a total ass. That guy, what a rude creature that guy was. Phyllis Schlafly, she also acted like she was royalty. But some of the people I know that were at this conference, Tom DeWeese, he was just a real personable, nice guy.
Is he Council for National Policy? I'm not even sure. I haven't had the chance to figure that out.
I've heard he was, but I don't know for sure. But I do know that he talks about fake global warming stuff and gets money from ExxonMobil. That's a fact. That's a fact. But
that right there, I think, raises some questions.
I think these guys, I think a lot of them at some levels are aware of the whole agenda. I think many of them are just brainwashed, just like anybody else is, Lee.
Right. I think you're correct on that.
I think there are levels of knowledge of the master plan compartmentalization, just like everything. I mean, you have the Arlington group, which is really the tip top of the CMP pyramid that has people like, for instance, Joe Scarborough from the Secretary Killer. He's a member of the Arlington group, along with people like Hagee and some of the other Christian theocrats. But, there's compartmentalization in all of these groups, and certainly the ones at the higher up probably know more than the ones at the bottom.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, because all these groups, they're set up in a compartmentalized fashion. You see it with the secret societies. You see it with these intelligence agencies. You see it with a lot of these, even Fortune 500 corporations. You have a hierarchical type of structure in which if you're just a regular worker at the bottom of the structure, you're not going to know what the master plan of the whole corporation actually is. And so you see this philosophy that is intertwined with a lot of these organizations. And Josh, you're probably right. The Council for National Policy is probably like that in many respects, although it does seem as if there are a lot of really powerful players that are controlling things at the top. I mean, people like Howard Phillips, Phyllis Schlafly. I mean, the people that Charlotte Isby is mentioning in this article right here, this is back in 2007, not a whole long time ago. I think certainly raises a number of questions because these people, clearly, they're on the very top of this power structure, at least I would gather from my research. Dobson, Fuellner, I mean, these people are pretty high up.
I mean, that was kind of all the problem I always had with the group initially, Lee, was the fact that, my first question about the group was, okay, well, if there's nothing to it, then, don't you see a problem with there being people on membership lists of the CMP that have come out, people like Rothschilds, and there's been DuPonts and lots of these big globalist players? I mean, I think that we should have questions about people like Michael Badnarik being a keynote speaker, admitted by the New York Times in 2002. He was there, and on and on and on. I think that's the biggest thing about it is that, if there's nothing to this group, then, you should have, you should have an objection to associating with people who are known to be tied to things like the Rothschild family, et cetera. So that's always been a big question for me.
Yeah, I would agree. And those are where my questions are as well. So, very interesting stuff. But folks, just look into the Council for National Policy information and, you'll see what we're talking about. This is a legitimate, real organization. This is definitely something that needs to be talked about. And clearly, there has not been nearly enough attention on that or the John Birch Society. So look into these groups and you'll see how this all fits in to this controlled opposition fraud that we've been talking about for a very long time now. But anyway, we've been going at this for 2 hours. We've only had one break. So what we're going to do is we're going to take another 5 or 6 minute break, play some music. And on the other side, looks like I have a couple email questions that we'll get to. So that's what we'll do. We'll play some music, and then on the other side of the break, we'll get to these email questions, and we'll throw the questions at Josh and see what he has to say about some of these listener questions that have come in. So, folks, we'll be right back. Going to play some tunes. Welcome back. Third hour of the show. I'm joined here by my guest, Josh Reeves. Again, you can check out his website at theglobalreality.com. You can check out his documentary films, his radio show, everything about his work you can check out up on that website. And Josh, we do have a few questions from the listening audience. A few people have emailed their questions. And I guess we'll go with the first one. This listener wants to know about David Icke. I already know what you think of David Icke, but just for the benefit of the listening audience, do you consider David Icke a credible source of information? What's your take on David Icke?
Well, when it comes to a lot of things like that, I can only judge oftentimes what I've had in my own experiences, and I've talked about here on the show before. I had a strange experience back in 2006 when Alex Jones premiered his film Terror Storm here in Dallas, and I was a fan of him at that time, and I was waiting in line to get a beer, and he was sitting in this little box office thing, and I look over, and he's glaring at me, going like with his teeth gritted and his crazy eyes, and he looked like a demon, man. I'm not even kidding you. And I was freaked out by that because I was such a big fan of him at that time, and I couldn't fathom what that was about. And now I'm wondering, my goodness, I mean, is it deeper than I want to admit to myself that it is? I mean, is it possible that this guy knew the future and knew what I was going to be doing in the future? I mean, it's bizarre to me. The same thing with David Icke. One of the really the first big guests I ever got on the show. I had some other big guests on prior to that, but I'd only been on air maybe about 5 or 6 months. This was back when you and I were doing the show on TrueNet Radio with Mike Chambers over there. And I had David Icke on the program, and I had him on for 2 hours. And at the end of the 2 hours, it was a 3-hour show. And at the end of the 2 hours, I felt like I had the energy drained out of me. I felt I could barely make it through the last hour of the show. I had a horrible migraine headache. I just felt as if I had psychic vampirism committed on me. And I was still a huge fan of David Icke, for about a year or so after that. And last year, me and some friends decided to go to he does these big epic 10-hour speaking things, and we decided, because he never really came close to where we lived. He was in New Mexico. Then we decided that we would go. So we went to see David Icke at this big 10-hour speaking thing. And before we went in, there was all these signs. It was at an Indian casino in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and there was all these signs that said what time each part of the thing started, and then it said at such and such time after the event was over, there would be a meet and greet. And so I went inside and was there with Delphi, and we were kind of sitting there watching the thing, and we were in there about 2 or 3 minutes, and we started to feel like we were being put under a trance. And they had these big barricades at the back of the auditorium that went about 50 yards. You couldn't see back behind the stage. You couldn't tell what was back there. I mean, they could have had mind control machines back there for all we know. You couldn't see anything back there. And so we had to go outside and smoke a cigarette. We just felt as if we were just, being lulled into a trance. And about halfway through the event, we had stepped outside to have a smoke. And as we're stepping outside to have a smoke, this strange woman comes out and says, "Hey, what are y'all doing out here?" And we're like, "We're having a cigarette." And she's like, "Oh," and then she presents herself as the person who put on this entire David Icke event, and she seemed very weird, kind of a new agey type woman with kind of whitish hair. And she said that David Icke had come to do this entire speaking thing for free as a benefit for some school she was starting. And she said, "Well, I just wanted to see who was out here." And she asked us who we were. And I told her I was Josh Reeves and I was the radio host. And she kind of got a weird look on her face when I said that. And she said, "Oh, well, we've had some kids trying to sneak in and get in for free." And I'm sitting there going, "Well, there's not that many people here to begin with. And I just don't see kids, like some meddling kids trying to sneak into a David Icke event. And it's not that cool of a thing, and not that many people know about it. It seemed kind of like she was lying to me when she said that." And so we went through the whole event. And after we got to the end of the event, kind of one of the main reasons we went is because I was going to ask David Icke some questions on camera and get him to respond to them. And lo and behold, when we got to the end of the show, after we had talked to that lady, all of a sudden there's no meet and greet when he'd had one at every other event. And I kind of felt like it was because he knew that I